Hey there. We're all isolated. We're home in lockdown, and sometimes we want some comfort when we're in that kind of situation. So I was thinking that maybe people might want to learn how to make an apple pie. So that's what I'm going to try to do today, is to teach you how to make an apple pie. You can do it. I remember this is a recipe that my mother-in-law taught me when I was in my early to mid 20s, I guess, mid 20s. I had not been able to make a pie. My mother was a great pie maker, but I never could get it the way she did it. So I asked my mother-in-law, and she taught me this pie recipe, and I've been using it for almost 40 years. So here we go. I've got most of my ingredients, I hope all of my ingredients here on the counter. And I hope that you'll be able to see what I'm doing on the counter when I roll everything out, but you'll at least see the process. So I'm going to start by taking a cup measure and measuring 2 cups of flour. I use unbleached flour. It can be organic or non-organic. So there's 1 cup. And the next cup. There we go. 2 cups. 2 cups of flour. Then I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of salt. And a lot of times I use pink Himalayan salt, but it's almost gone. So I'm just going to use this sea salt here that I have. So 1 teaspoon of salt, and I just stir that in. Then I'm going to take a little bit of butter, and this is a little bit softened. And it's approximately a tablespoon of butter, and I kind of just eyeball it. If you wanted to measure it, that would be fine too. About a tablespoon of butter. And then I kind of just cut it into the flour. I just work it into the flour until it's small pieces, crumbly a little bit. It's not very much. The house is chilly. If the house were warmer, the butter would be softer and it would kind of just mix in super easily. The recipe actually called for using like Crisco shortening, but I haven't done that in years. So I just use a little bit of butter. The next thing is to take oil, and you can use any oil that you have, any vegetable oil, canola oil. I happen to use olive oil pretty much exclusively, and I'm going to pour a 1/2 cup of oil. If you use olive oil, I would suggest using a very light, mild flavored olive oil for baking. And I'm going to pour that oil into this flour mixture. And then I'm going to stir that up, and it's going to get nice and crumbly. Just keep stirring and kind of working all that oil into the flour. You'll be able to see some pieces of the butter that you'll be able to work out a little bit too. Now that you're working in the oil. And just keep mixing that till it's nice and crumbly. And you can probably see that a little bit. Maybe it's just a crumbly mix. Then I'm going to take a tablespoon, and I'm going to get 2 tablespoons more of flour and put it into the measuring cup that I used for the oil. And then I'm going to add some cold water. So I'm going to get my water out of the refrigerator, and I'm going to add it up to the 1/2 cup mark in my measuring cup. Okay, so I got that out of my refrigerator door, so it's cold. And I'm stirring the flour into that water. You don't have to get it totally smooth. It's kind of hard to do with flour. But get it as mixed as possible so that there might be just a few little clumps of flour, but not too much. Get it mixed as well as you can. And then we're going to pour this into our mixture. Set that aside. Okay. And now we're going to mix this all together. It's going to be a little bit wetter than maybe your typical pie crust recipe would be, which for me it makes it easier to work with and I can roll it out easier. So mixing that all together, and depending on where you live, you might have to add a little bit less or a little bit more water, depending on the humidity. I have noticed that sometimes the weather, the temperature, the humidity makes a little bit of difference in the way it comes out, but it's pretty consistent. So I'm going to take that. It's in a pretty nice ball right now, and I'm just going to make it a little bit better of a ball here. And then I'm going to divide it in half. So I'm going to divide the dough in half, and I'm going to set one part aside. So I've got one ball. I'm going to make it a little bit smoother in my hands like this, so that I've got a pretty smooth little ball right here ready to be rolled out. You can see I have my rolling pin here. Now I'm going to take a pretty generous amount of flour and put it down on my counter. And then set my dough. I'm still just working it a little bit on the edges like this. And I'm going to set my dough down, and I'm going to just kind of press it with the palm, like the heel of my palm. Press it out just a little bit. Then I'm going to take my rolling pin, and I'm going to add some flour to my rolling pin, and I'm going to start rolling it out. It's a good idea to roll in one direction and then change directions. Don't roll back and forth like that too much, but roll in one direction, then you continue to different direction. Keep putting flour on your rolling pin, and just roll this dough out. Keep working at it to try to even it up a little bit, so that you're going to end up with a nice round circle that'll fit into a 10-inch pie plate like this. Okay, so I'm going to keep rolling. It doesn't have to be perfectly round around the edges. I've got a little bit of a jagged piece here, and I'm going to try to just mush it together a little bit so that it's just a little bit more even. And pull that dough. Keep working that dough, getting it to do what I want it to do. Remember to keep flouring the rolling pin. I'm just moving that dough out so it will go into this 10-inch pie plate. My circle is not perfect, but it's going to work, and this is going to be the bottom crust, and especially for the bottom crust, it doesn't have to be perfect. So when I've rolled it enough, I'm going to pull some of that dough up around the rolling pin. I know you can't see it too well because of the angle of the phone, but I've rolled the dough onto the rolling pin now. Okay, this makes it super easy to put into the pie plate. Then I just put the edge of the dough on the edge of the pie plate and unroll the rolling pin. And voila, we have the bottom crust lying there nicely. I'm just going to push it gently down into the bottom of the pie plate, and then I'm going to set it aside. Okay. Then I'm going to take the other piece of dough and do the same thing with this. Just getting it into a nice round kind of a disc. Just like this a little bit. I can feel a little bit that it's not quite as wet as maybe I would want it to be, but I think that it's going to be okay. after you've done this several times, you'll get to know your dough and know when it's going to roll out the best. And this one I can tell kind of that maybe there wasn't quite enough liquid in it, but I still think it's going to work. So again, I put flour down on the counter. I used the heel of my palm to press it down, and then I floured my rolling pin, and now I'm going to start the rolling pot process here. This will be the top crust. And I continue to get flour on my rolling pin. Continue to just move the dough out. Again, like I said, I probably didn't get quite enough liquid in this batch, so it's taking a little bit longer to roll it out. But I still think it's going to work out fine. And you'll find that sometimes it's just perfect. Sometimes it's you can tell it's a little bit harder to work with, but just keep gently pushing that dough out, all the edges, until you've got the big, nice, round circle. Again, that will be your top crust. You can see how I'm just working out all around the edges. I know you can't see the counter, but you can tell what I'm doing with my arms. Okay, and this looks pretty good, so I'm going to take my rolling pin again and lay it down and pull the crust up over that rolling pin and roll it right up just like that. And then for now, I'm going to set it aside because at this point, we want to put our filling in before we put the top on. So let's take a break.